Mile high hello, everybody in Broncos country, and welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me, as always, is your Denver Broncos insider and Mile High Huddle's senior NFL draft analyst, Erick Trickel. Erick, what's going on, man? How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. It's finally to start looking like winter up here. We have a really bad storm coming in. Well, actually, it's been kind of hitting most of the day, but we've just been getting rain. Overnight temperature's supposed to drop and it's supposed to start sleeting, so hopefully the roads aren't too bad in the morning. We'll see what happens. But I like the winter, but I hate the storms that we get up here.
Yeah, it looks like you guys had a pretty wicked storm coming in your guys' way. You sent us a pretty nasty picture of the radar the other day, and on the flip side, down here in Wyoming, it was like 57 degrees today, and perfectly clear, not a cloud in the sky, not a breath of wind. And that typically doesn't happen for us, especially, in the middle of November. But I mean, it's kind of nice to have this nice, warm, mild weather for a Wyoming winter, especially where I live at. Yeah, I mean, we did have a couple of days, a couple of weeks ago where it was, in the negatives. It was like negative 15 there in the morning when I went to work in the morning. So it is nice to have the mild weather. But anyways, guys, we're coming off the bye week for the Denver Broncos this week and going into Minnesota to play the Minnesota Vikings. But this week we're going to kind of break down, the emergence of one wide receiver, Courtland Sutton, and the effectiveness that he has had for this Broncos offense and how immaculate this guy has been over the past 9 weeks, and just the lack of efficiency from the rest of the wide receivers on the Broncos roster. So, guys, here we go.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, now with Courtland Sutton, the way that he has been playing here over the course of this season, we're finally seeing the emergence of Courtland Sutton into becoming one of the top wide receivers in the NFL, and it's happening very quickly. I mean, this guy is very big, very explosive, and we saw it with a big 77-yard touchdown reception that he had against the Los Angeles Chargers. The big time catches, particularly the touchdown catch over Denzel Ward against the Cleveland Browns a couple weeks ago. Like this guy is really emerging into the guy that we really thought that he was going to be coming out of the draft in 2018. And Erick, I mean, I just want you to kind of break it down just a little bit. What do you see most specifically when you watch Courtland Sutton as a wide receiver on the game tape?
Well, one thing I want to say is that he isn't looking like the player that we thought he would be when he came out of college. He's looking better. The biggest thing that I had with him coming out of college was his route running. Typically, receivers of his size, you don't see running routes very neatly or crisp. They just kind of like round their cuts out and things like that. But with Courtland Sutton, we're seeing tremendous improvement there. From the route runner he was last year to the route runner he is this year, very different. Like drastic changes, drastic improvements that he has had. And that is tremendous. And that is being able to allow him and the Broncos to use him in a more diverse way. He's not just that 70-30 ball getter like we saw against the Cleveland Browns with that touchdown that you mentioned, but we're seeing him being able to go lose corners in his routes and getting good separation, which is just, again, it's just great to see because Denver needed him to step up. This is a guy that they invested a lot in, and they don't have talented receivers anymore. Demaryius Thomas, he was kind of definitely on the decline. Emmanuel Sanders, he was constantly getting hurt, and now they traded him. They needed a receiver to step up, and thankfully Courtland Sutton did because no other receiver on this roster has. But it all comes down to that route running of his, and it's a point that can't be stressed enough. His route running has become so good that it's opening up so much more that he and the Broncos can do.
Yeah, and it's not just necessarily the route running, and he is definitely getting open. It's the added concentration that he's had when he's catching the football this year. Last year he did struggle with drops, and you could credit a lot of that to just his rookie struggles and everything like that, adjusting to the NFL game. But this year, through 9 games played that he has right now, Courtland Sutton only has 1 drop on 45 catchable targets per Pro Football Focus. That's a 2.2% drop rate. That is good for number 4. If you take away all the guys that are perfect right now, and there's a myriad of guys. Emmanuel Sanders is one of them. Obviously, Larry Fitzgerald. There's a handful of guys. But at 2.2% drop percentage, that's the 4th best drop percentage in the entire NFL. So, and the one big drop that he did have was on a quick slant play. Like he's going up, he's getting the ball, and then he's doing explosive things with it after the catch. It seems like every single game we're seeing him not only on like the quick slant routes and on the big fade routes, he's making a big play coming across the middle of the field on like a deep drive route. He's catching the ball out in front of his body and then getting that big body going. I mean, 6'3", 225, whatever. At least close to that. He's the explosiveness that this guy has for the size that he has it's translating into a way that he's really becoming an elite receiver in the NFL. I mean, going forward just a little bit, you talk about just the yards per catch, the yards per route run. I narrowed it down on Pro Football Focus to a minimum of 60 targets this year. We're talking number 6 in the NFL, 2.28 yards per route run, behind Amari Cooper, Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, and Julio Jones. Those are some of the top receivers in the entire NFL, and Courtland Sutton is right up there with all of them. Just the advanced analytics and everything we're seeing with the way that he's able to make the big plays after the catch and the way that he is actually getting himself open and create a dynamic threat for this offense. He's the MVP for this offense, and I don't think there's any question about it. Do you?
I definitely don't. There hasn't been an offensive player better than him. Phillip Lindsay, he's been good, but he hasn't been great. Royce Freeman, he's been good, but he hasn't been great. There hasn't been anybody on this offense that has really been great besides Courtland Sutton. He has truly entered that realm of being a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL currently, and he's just going to keep climbing. If he keeps developing the way he is, a year from now, we are probably talking about him as a top 5 corner or top 5 receiver in the NFL at the very least. Like the growth he has had in just the last year has been tremendous. And as you mentioned, it isn't just the route running, it's the hands, which is just, it's mind-boggling the amount of progress and growth he has shown, because you typically don't see a player grow as much as he has in the last year. And one thing that stands out to me is, can you imagine how much better he could even be if another receiver on this offense stepped up to help take coverage away from him? There isn't another receiving threat. I mean, against the Browns, only other receiver who was targeted was Deontay Spencer, and that was once. Every other pass went towards a tight end or a running back. And Courtland Sutton still had a really good game. And it's just, again, if somebody's able to step up, then you're taking away extra safety help or an extra corner, or basically helping take the double team away from him, especially with Noah Fant stepping up as he has, especially with the running backs looking like solid threats out of the backfield. They have these weapons that they have that can really help out Sutton and help him be even better than he is. Just where are they? Like Fred Brown, he's not cutting it. Deontay Spencer, okay, he looks okay as a deep threat, but I mean, his one catch against the Browns was a fumble. You have Deshaun Hamilton, who's good in his role as a blocker, but he hasn't stepped up as a receiver. Like, where is it? Where's the help for Courtland Sutton? Because without that help, he's as great as he's been, he's still going to be limited. He's still going to be hurt because they don't have that number 2 receiver.
Yeah, and if there is another wide receiver that could actually step up and create a positive impact, get 4 or 5 targets a game on the other side of Courtland Sutton, and remove that bracket coverage. I mean, Noah Fant's doing a really good job, especially over the middle of the field. The big explosive play that he had against the Browns, 75-yard touchdown catch and run. That's going to be effective as far as dropping a safety down and maybe getting Courtland Sutton, but still they're going to try to start bracket covering this guy here directly. I mean, we're talking like AJ Green territory, Julio Jones territory, stuff like that. Just being able to get some attention drawn away from Courtland Sutton is going to be paramount for this Broncos offense, and it has to start now. And you look at, like, against the Cleveland Browns, the one big play that they did try to get Deontay Spencer to involve in the passing game was a deep shot. It was a play-action deep shot, and Brandon Allen overthrew him by like 5 yards. So that's one target, though, and it was a nice sight to see, might I add, with the Broncos' offensive woes. But I mean, Deshaun Hamilton and Fred Brown and Deontay Spencer, you combine all their targets, they have 33 total targets. take out Emmanuel Sanders into the equation, but per ESPN statistics right now, obviously Courtland Sutton is the top targeted receiving threat for the Broncos. Then it's Noah Fant, Royce Freeman, and then Phillip Lindsay. And Phillip Lindsay has 32 targets as a running back. So you have 3 wide receivers, guys that are supposed to be catching the ball and getting open and making plays for this Broncos offense. 3 guys that have 33 combined targets. They're not even the 4th best receiving threat on this team combined. So we've got to see something from these guys moving forward. And Eric, you did do a really good job taking the proactive sense in this and coming up with the Mile High Huddle Roundtable, the MVPs, the Offensive Player of the Year, the Defensive Player of the Year, the mid-season awards for the Broncos team through the first half of the season. And I did kind of throw Deshaun Hamilton under the bus just a little bit because, yes, he does have his role. He is that kind of a decoy receiver, kind of a blocking receiver. That's his role. But without Emmanuel Sanders in the fold anymore, Deshaun Hamilton really needs to be the guy to step up. And if not, then we really need to see the development that Tim Patrick is going to show coming in when he comes off of IR here in the next couple weeks. So without having another elite receiving threat, Courtland Sutton might be on an island by himself all the time. And he has been, at least for the last couple of weeks. Eric, I don't know. What do you think?
I definitely agree. And with Deshaun Hamilton, a lot of people make the point that he's getting open, which he is. He has been getting open. There is no argument for me there. But the issue is when he's getting open. There were a lot of times where he was getting open with Joe Flacco as the quarterback, but it wasn't early enough in the play. It was as pressure was getting there, as Flacco was trying to get himself out of the pocket, as Flacco was getting hit, as Flacco was winding up to target somebody else. Like, he wasn't getting open early enough in the play, which is kind of a concerning to me because Deshaun Hamilton coming out of college was a very good route runner. He is probably, even with Courtland Sutton's improvement, he is probably the best route runner on the team. He runs very crisp routes, and they're very clean and nuanced, and yet he's still struggling to get open. Like, is there a tell with his breaks or something? It's very, very curious about that. Is it just a lack of athleticism that he has? Because he's not a bad athlete by any means, but he's not a very dynamic athlete. And that's what Denver really needs is Deshaun Hamilton. He could be good in a certain role in the passing game, just as he is, just kind of like similar to the role he has now. But they need somebody dynamic. And Tim Patrick, as good as he could possibly, well, shouldn't say as good as he possibly can be, but with all the traits he has, he isn't a very dynamic athlete. There is 1 or 2 ways that you can really use him effectively, but he's not a guy that's going to come bring a whole bunch of new added stuff to your offense. Fred Brown's not that guy. Deontay Spencer, he's not that guy. They need that dynamic athletic receiver, and they just don't have that. And without that, it's going to hurt Courtland Sutton, and it's going to hurt this offense, and it's going to be limiting to this offense. But back to Deshaun Hamilton, as I digress from my point a little bit, with his route running, is he can be effective against zone coverage, but he's got to get open sooner. I mean, not especially now with Brandon Allen, who's getting the ball out a little bit quicker, or he's being able to move a little bit quicker. He needs to be able to get open. He needs to be able to read the quarterback. He needs to be able to read the cornerback and just play emergency ball at times if the quarterback gets out of the pocket. And we haven't seen that yet. Getting open is nice. It's great even, but it's a matter of the timing. You got to get open in time for the quarterback to hit you. And that's been the issue with Hamilton. So, like, you can sit here and talk about how open he's getting, but it's just, again, the time isn't there.
Yeah, and another kind of an interesting thing with Deshaun Hamilton is I mean, when you go into yards per route run, it's kind of a flawed statistic, especially when you're not getting the opportunities and everything like that, especially with Deshaun Hamilton and the fact that, yes, he is getting open, he's getting open late. And I think a lot of that has to do with the athleticism with him, is just the limited athleticism that he does actually have. He runs really crisp and smooth routes and everything like that, but just not the escapability. He's not very good at fighting off press coverage, and just the limited athleticism is probably leading to a lot of that. And he is getting open, but I mean, when you go to the adjusted yards per route run, he's second to last in the NFL right now. 0.48, second to last in the NFL if you minimize it down to 20% of 101 targets. So essentially 20 targets is what we're talking about here. And also he has a 15.4% drop rate 2 drops on 13 catchable targets and he does have 11 catches. So it's not only the fact that he's not getting open, he's just struggling to have any kind of effect on this offense as a whole in general, outside of just the blocking prowess that he does have. Like, the Broncos desperately need somebody to step up for the rest of the season if they want to even come close to, I mean, and Eric, you and I have talked about this a couple of times. This team is a lot closer than people are really giving them credit for. I mean, we're sitting 3-6 right now, and this team could very easily be 6-3. We're talking 3 late game-winning field goals to lose 3 games. So at 6-3, this team is knocking on the door of the playoffs. I mean, they're competing for the division. So without having Deshaun Hamilton stepping up and everything like that, there's no chance for this team to turn it around without a secondary receiver, So we've got to figure out something. We have to figure out something. The Broncos have to do something to figure out their receiving core, or else it's just going to be the Courtland Sutton show, which is not necessarily a bad show to watch. But, guys, we're running a little bit long here. We got to take a quick break. But before we go, I just want to remind you all to head on over to milehighhuddle.com to check out all of our written content on your Denver Broncos. At the Huddle website, you'll get breaking news, analysis, and opinion articles, as well as in-depth film breakdowns of not only Broncos players, but matchups to watch in an upcoming game like the upcoming game against the Minnesota Vikings, or even our NFL draft covers. Top notch. This is the best that you're going to be able to find, especially with Erick Trickel in the fold. Also, make sure you guys take a couple minutes to create your own personalized profile. Hit up the comment sections. Voice your opinions on anything you agree or disagree with. It's free. It's easy to use. And we love to talk football with all of our listeners. So you guys can also sit in with us during the live game thread to talk your thoughts on how the team is performing as well. So with that, guys, we'll step away. We'll be right back on the other side of this quick break. Sit tight.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, guys, welcome back into Dove Valley Deep Divers. We just got done talking about the wide receiver position, how Courtland Sutton is broken out, and the lack of limited weapons that the Broncos have outside of him as far as the receiving core goes. And that's just with the struggles Deshaun Hamilton has had, the not knowing with Tim Patrick coming up. Juwan Winfrey hasn't seen the field hardly at all. Deontay Spencer probably going to be limited to like the punt return role gadget player, which is pretty much what he's been this year. The Broncos have a big need, and they need to go find a guy that can be that explosive playmaker, and probably the best way to do so is by targeting a player in the NFL draft. And there are a lot of very intriguing options, especially this wide receiver class this year is extremely loaded. It's very top heavy, but there is a lot of depth throughout this wide receiver class. And we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the ongoing feud between CeeDee Lamb out of Oklahoma and Jerry Jeudy as that 1A, 1B. It just depends your taste on what you want to do. And Eric, you and Nick Kendall have kind of gone on back and forth, and Carl jumped in on this as well on our private group chat. Is it time to start saying that CeeDee Lamb is the number 1 prospect in the NFL draft at the wide receiver position this year?
I actually think you hit the nail on the head, really, with your comment about it all depends on what you really want. Both players are extremely talented. Both players are surefire top 10 picks in the NFL draft next year because they are very dynamic playmakers. They can do a lot. They can add a lot to your offense. I think that's like Jerry Jeudy. If you are looking for an outstanding elite level route runner who has good hands and good, not great, but good speed to sit there and make the big play after the catch, then awesome. There's your number 1 guy. If you want a guy who can be dynamic, who doesn't rely on the quarterback on the placement because has a really good catch radius, but also doesn't have great speed, his route running is good, not great, then CeeDee Lamb's your guy. I've been going back and forth with this. They are very closely rated. On my board, I can't remember the exact number, but I know they're like 4 and 5. And like every time I go and I'm writing down my board and everything like that and trying to see, like looking at my grades and figuring out where I want to move them and doing a little bit more work and all the stuff that goes into making my board, it's constantly like they're so close that it's just which one. I've been really considering putting CeeDee Lamb as my number 1 wide receiver, but right now Jerry Jeudy is, and I can get the argument for either one because both of these guys are elite talents.
Yeah, it's so fun to watch Jerry Jeudy, though, and I think that I'm going to keep him as far as right now, and I'm not nearly in depth as you guys are. I've made it very vocal. I'm waiting to do a lot of my stuff, but the stuff that I have seen about Jerry Jeudy, just the catch after the or ability after the catch, to make the big play after he catches the football, and he shows it every single week. The elite route running, the way that he makes people just look stupid when they're trying to tackle him. It's absolutely amazing to watch, and that would be my number one guy if I were saying that the draft would be right now. But CeeDee Lamb, you're absolutely right. Big body, big catch radius, has really good speed. I think he might actually be just a little bit faster than Jerry Jeudy. He's not quite as explosive as, in traffic with the football, I don't think necessarily, but with either one, you're going to find a top guy, and that's going to be that guy, the guy that Deshaun Hamilton isn't being, the guy that Tim Patrick isn't being. That's the one guy. If you're not going offensive tackle in the first round, if you can get one of CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Jeudy in the first round in the top 10 for the Denver Broncos, that's a huge hit, because again, this on the other side of this coin, the offensive tackle class this year looks really good as well. And the second round, particularly the top of the second round, you've got like Erick Jackson, Austin Jackson, the left tackle out of USC. Like, there's a lot of guys that in the second round. Prince Tegawanago, like there's some guys at the top end of the second round that can come in and be a franchise left tackle for you. So if you're going to try to build the nest around, maybe say Drew Lock, like who's that guy? We haven't really heard much about him. Well, he did start practicing, but like if you're going to start building the nest around and kind of get Drew Lock a set of weapons that he can go into 2020 and be successful with, if he's going to be the starting quarterback for this Broncos team, you would be very well out if you put Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb at the top of that draft class for the Denver Broncos. Now, moving forward, you got another guy. This is another guy, and it really kind of turns around if the Broncos do, have some success over the last half of this season. In Henry Ruggs III, the other Alabama wide receiver, and this is the guy, this is your deep threat, your speed threat. Like this guy's going to run 4.2 something at the combine, I bet. Like, he's extremely fast. It's not just a deep threat. Over the middle of the field, catching the ball, get him in open space, and just watch him run. It's amazing. Eric, what do you think about Henry Ruggs? We kind of talked about him last week, but that's a perfect fit for the Broncos, if you ask me.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about a few names as well, just for time's sake too. But first, I'll start with Henry Ruggs. He definitely has the speed. I think that his time is going to be huge. A lot of people are going to keep eyes on that at the combine for the 40-yard dash, because there's been a lot of talk that he's going to be able to run a sub 4.240. So if he does that, then his stock's going to skyrocket. I think he's right there on about a top 15 pick right now. His routes are good. They could be a lot better, but when he's running them that fast, it's no matter how good they are, it's hard for corners to keep up with him. And then he's got pretty good hands. Has a decent ability to go get the ball. Like, there's just so many good traits with him on top of that speed that's just helping him rise up the board. Then you have another Alabama receiver in Devontae Smith, who he's rising up boards quickly, and he's going to be right there probably in the conversation for, if not first round, early second round. Laviska Shenault, the Colorado receiver, I'm sure a lot of listeners who are probably familiar with him, since a lot of them are probably in Colorado, he's very dynamic receiver, great athlete, plays the receiver position more like a running back, and he's just able to make people miss and make great plays from that. Jalen Reagor out of TCU. Hands are a little bit of an issue, but he's constantly, anytime the ball's thrown his way, you have a risk of a big play. T. Higgins is a guy that I don't see very much for the Broncos, simply because he is very similar to Courtland Sutton when Courtland Sutton was come out. Huge catch radius, 70-30 ball guy. His routes need a lot of work. Similar size, similar build, similar play style. Tyler Johnson, he's another guy I'm not so sure with Denver being interested in there. He's a better version of Deshaun Hamilton, a little bit more athletic, very good route runner. KJ Hamler, Penn State, guy who's a redshirt sophomore, might return back to school. Very smaller guy, Tyreek Hill-ish like type player, smaller, speedy, can make big plays, make people miss. Sage Surratt, Wake Forest, he suffered a bad injury, so I would be shocked if he didn't decide to return. Tylan Wallace as well, he's another one. But then you've got just naming off names quickly and just talking about how deep this class is. Right now, I think there are 19, maybe only 18 receivers in my top 100 players, and that is ridiculous. You've got Justin Jefferson, You have Brandon Ayuk, you have Colin Johnson, Devin Duvernay, Brian Edwards, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Isaiah Hodgins, KJ Hill. You've got Denzel Mims. You've got J.D. Spielman, who's probably right up there with them. You've got Marquise Stevenson, who's probably up there, Van Jefferson. You've got guys like John Hightower later, Tyree Cleveland out of Florida later, James Proche, Reggie Robertson, Demetrius Robertson. Just so many names. This is such a great receiver class that Denver definitely needs to be looking at receiver. And if anything, take two, because your receiver group outside of Courtland Sutton isn't that good. I know that a lot of people are saying, well, they have so many other needs, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. Denver's right now is looking at 12 picks in the NFL draft. Like, that's going to be a good way to build your needs, but getting more dynamic playmakers at your receiver position is a need. Deshaun, as we talked about the whole first time, Deshaun Hamilton, Fred Brown, Deontay Spencer, none of them have stepped up. And this receiver class is so good, so talented, so deep that Denver can easily afford getting two guys and having a good shot at drastically turning around the receiver core.
Yeah, and it's an amazing idea. With just the names, you said, 18 or 19 guys and just your top 100 players alone? That just goes to show you how deep and effective this draft class could actually be at the wide receiver position. Like I said, and we'll continue to say, I don't get going on it, but I do know that this wide receiver class, just off the top of my head, I mean, Devin Duvernay, that's a guy that I really like out of Texas. Donovan Peoples-Jones out of Michigan, that's another guy that I really like in the third and fourth round. Like, there's a big opportunity for the Broncos to really build the nest and give a quarterback of the future, whether that's Drew Lock, whether that's a 2020 draft pick, whether it's whoever it may be, another veteran free agent that John Elway manages to bring in to fill the void, at least for another season. Whoever it is, you've got to do something to build up this wide receiver core and do something to give them some weapons so that they can actually be somewhat effective. Like, if you have to take two, great, take two. If you have to take three, great, take three. You got 12 picks, as you said. So just tap into the potential. Tap into the potential at the offensive tackle depth in this class. I mean, there's a lot of guys in day 2 and 3 that could be developmental swing tackles or maybe even slide inside the guard. I mean, you have to do something and build this team up the right way. And I mean, if you're going to do it the right way, take advantage of the deep class and take a couple players if you have to. But guys, we're going to take another quick break. On the other side, we're going to break down the Minnesota Vikings just briefly for you guys. So hold on, we'll be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, guys, welcome back to Dove Valley Deep Divers. We're coming into a game that I'm not necessarily so sure about with the Denver Broncos. They're going into Minnesota to take on the Minnesota Vikings, and led by their very, very great young running back, Dalvin Cook. And Dalvin Cook has been absolutely spectacular this year. Top 5 in the NFL in rushing, and the whole offense is literally driven through Dalvin Cook right now. And even with the offensive line not being able to pass protect, the Vikings are still running the ball at will against teams. I mean, Dalvin Cook has 4 or 5 100-yard games this year, and with the Broncos allowing over 100 yards per game on their run defense right now, despite what Pro Football Focus wants to say on their running grades for the Denver Broncos defense. 107 yards against this Vikings rushing attack that has been able to churn out 100-yard games at will. Eric, this is not looking good for the Broncos, man. What do you think?
I think the Broncos will be helped out a little bit with the injuries that the Vikings are taking on, but man, it's going to be hard to watch them try and stop Dalvin Cook because, as you said, he's just been tremendous this year. Their offensive line isn't that great, but they're good run blockers, and then Dalvin Cook's able to create for himself, and he makes people miss. So a lot is going to fall on this Broncos defensive front and those linebackers and slowing him down. But even then, you have to worry about Kirk Cousins, who has been on fire the last few weeks. I can't remember the exact numbers, but he's over 70% completion percentage. He's got 15 touchdowns to 1 interception. He has been on fire. People want to make fun of him for all the contract he has and the bad play he has had, but there is no denying how great he has been over the last few weeks. I mean, even without Adam Thielen, he has been tremendous. So if you take away Dalvin Cook, then you have that going on against them. And Denver has struggled against better passing teams who can also run the ball. Look at the Packers. Look what the Raiders, teams that have been able to do both have gave them fits. Even the Chiefs, without Patrick Mahomes, gave them issues because they were able to run the ball, not great, but decently well. So it's tough. It's a tough game for this Broncos defense. The Vikings defense, on the other hand, like, they have their issues. They're a good run defensive unit. Their pass coverage is a little bit struggling. They have opportunistic corners who, if Brandon Allen isn't basically pinpoint perfect with his placement, they're going to make him pay for it. Just a very opportunistic defense. It's going to be a tough one to watch. A lot's going to fall on Brandon Allen, I think, in this one, and being able to move the ball. He's definitely got to step up his game. And I actually have a video about it at Mile High Huddle that you guys can watch, and it explains a little bit more and breaks down a little bit more what he needs to improve upon after his first start. But again, it's his second start, this one is, and it's on the road in a tough environment against a team that's playing really good football. Even though the passing's not great, they're not going to be able to run the ball like they were against the Browns to help alleviate some of that pressure that he would have on him.
Right, and with the Vikings pass coverage right now, Carl Dummler has a really good article right now with 5 stats that you should really kind of take a look at for the Broncos to have some success against the Minnesota Vikings. And we were talking about how Courtland Sutton has been a breakout receiver this year and how he's actually turning into a one of the top 10 wide receivers in the NFL. And on the flip side of that coin, you've got Xavier Rhodes, who has been actually very, very struggling this year. It's kind of difficult to watch a guy that everyone is widely considering as like a top 5 cornerback, maybe even maybe even the best cornerback in the NFL. And going back to Brandon Allen, and going against Xavier Rhodes, Xavier Rhodes has given up a 121.3 quarterback rating when he has been targeted this year. That is atrocious. Like, this is a guy that was almost, it was like lockdown. You didn't want to throw in his directions. He's given up the 4th most receptions and the 19th most yards in the entire NFL this year. Like, the drop off with him has been amazing to see. It's horrible to see. But with a young quarterback in Brandon Allen, and it's going to rely a lot on his shoulders to put Courtland Sutton in the right direction, this is probably going to be the biggest matchup to watch for the Denver Broncos if they want to have any kind of sustained success offensively. And we've said it over and over again, Courtland Sutton has been the only guy that has actually had sustained success for the Broncos offense other than like Royce Freeman and Phillip Lindsay, but there you never know which one is going to actually be the guy. Like, Courtland Sutton has been the guy, and now he's got to match up against a cornerback that's been struggling. And it's not only just Xavier Rhodes. Trey Waynes on the other side is giving up a quarterback rating of 109.2. So he's given up the 10th most yards and the 5th most receptions on the season. Like, this Vikings secondary has been struggling trying to maintain these top tier receivers that they've been going against. So the Broncos passing game is kind of have to be paramount, which is terrifying for me to say. Wow, I can't believe I just said that. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for us today. We're going to wrap it up here. Thank you all once again for joining us on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. You guys can follow us both on Twitter by finding me at Sanderson MHH, and for Eric at Erick Trickel. Also, be sure to follow at Mile High Huddle and at Huddle Up Pod to set up your notifications for instant updates on your Denver Broncos. Each and every story or podcast published on the Huddle website is posted immediately on our Twitter handle, so you guys have instant access right at your fingertips. You guys can also like Mile High Huddle's Facebook page as well and get the same kind of a service. So we love and appreciate all of your guys' support, and if it weren't for you guys, we wouldn't be able to do what we do best, which is cover your Denver Broncos. So for Erick Trickel, I am Lance Sanderson. Thank you guys once again. You all stay safe, take care, and have a good day. Thank you.